Good morning. Today's scripture from Luke lifts up how Christians should live in relation to all people. Yet this is more than just a moral lesson. Jesus calls us to rise to God's level and relate to others just as God relates to us. For if we are to know God's forgiveness and generosity, then we must offer the same to all God's children. Listen now to the good news for us today in Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 38. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back.
I call our second reading from Genesis chapter 45 our focus reading, but actually both Genesis and Luke today go hand in hand. So Genesis lifts up a portion of the story of Joseph, the darling of his father and the annoyance of his brothers. To be rid of him, the brothers sold him into slavery, where because of his ability to interpret dreams, he comes to the attention of the Pharaoh and becomes chief administrative officer of the land in time to reap and garner bumper crops for 7 good years, to sell in the famine to follow. The whole famine covers the whole land until Jacob and his family are hit. And the brothers are dispatched to Egypt to buy grain, which puts them face to face with Joseph, though they do not initially recognize him. He toys with them, but eventually he can take it no longer. So listen now to the account of their meeting again in Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 15. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near. And he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Make haste and go up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. And there I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine yet to come, lest you and your household and all that have come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Make haste and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. The word that comes to us through God. Amen. Now, this is unrehearsed, and so I'm going to ask us for a rehearsal. So I'm going to say to Darlene here to help me out, to go back to There Is a Balm in Gilead, because this is good news, and this is a good news moment. And for there to be a balm in Gilead is good news. And so we need to kind of pump it up some. But I want us to change it also, because the balm is not now in Gilead, but it's in Ephrata. Same syllables. Perfect, huh? God had a plan. So there's a balm in Ephrata to make the wounded whole. So let's try that. There is a balm in Ephrata to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Ephrata to heal the sick soul. All right, we're going to come back to that, but not right now. For we have the good news to hear. And so let me share with you a quick story here of where on a New Year's Eve, Fred and Seymour were at the club talking. And Seymour said to Fred, you really need to go reconcile things with George. He said, you've never restored your friendship. You must. Seymour said to Fred, it's very unkind to be unfriendly at such a time. Go over now and wish him a Happy New Year. So Fred kind of walked across the room and walked up to George. And he says, George, I wish you a Happy New Year, but I want you to understand, only one. That isn't the spirit of what Joseph did in the Hebrew Scriptures, and it certainly isn't the spirit of what Jesus had proclaimed to the disciples and to us as we heard the reading from Luke, to love our enemies. But the problem that we have with Joseph, with that coming out of Genesis, and I'll just come right out and say it, that there's a danger to say that if God then will take evil and turn it into good, then why do I need to do good when God can do whatever I act and turn it into good? See, there's a danger there. Just in the same way that we can say, well, if we receive the grace and mercy and love of Christ, then I can be an SOB all my life, and at the end just proclaim my faith and have the slate wiped clean. See, the only problem with that, though, is that God knows our hearts and knows that if that's our reasoning, then we have condemned ourselves right from the very beginning. And so we look at Joseph. And let me refresh the story, because you see, Joseph is the great-grandson of Abraham. And we have Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and a long line of dysfunctional family. You know, remember, Abraham is the one who went down to Egypt originally, and when he had his wife Sarah with him, he told the Pharaoh that it was his sister, not his wife, for fear that Pharaoh would kill him and take his wife. And then Pharaoh has the dream. God speaks to him in a dream, again, a dream, and says that this isn't a sister, but a wife. And so Pharaoh goes to Abraham and confronts him to be able to make his slate clean. But then we hear a little bit later where Abraham does it again. He's a slow learner. And of course, we know that Isaac is the one that is deceived by his son Jacob. And Jacob then goes to his uncle's house and marries his cousin and is deceived by Laban and has to marry the second cousin. And then they steal the family idols, the family jewels, and are caught. And unbeknownst to Jacob, he says, we haven't done anything, but then Leah pulls out the goods after father leaves. And so again, they are dysfunctional in their interactions with one another. And then we come to Joseph and Joseph's brother. But Joseph isn't a pure goody-goody. He thinks he is. He flaunts his new robe in front of his brothers, who are then jealous of the favoritism that Joseph receives from their father Jacob. And they throw Joseph into a pit, first discussing whether or not they're going to kill him. And then they decide, well, let's throw him in a pit. And then some slave traders come along and they say, well, we'll sell him to these slave traders and be done with him. Might as well have killed him. But unbeknownst to them, that God had a plan, and God did turn things around. I mean, maybe that's happened in your life, where you have made a choice, maybe not the best of choices. I felt that God had called me to ministry as a teenager, and when I hit the age of 19, I said, no way. And I turned like Jonah, running away from God as fast as I could. I never gave up on God, and thank goodness God never gave up on me. But some 15 years later then, I acknowledged the fact that I had a call to ministry, and took the experiences that I had over those 15 years plus to enrich your lives in the sharing of stories that exemplify the good news that God has for us. And so we hear today that Joseph proclaims to his brothers, don't worry, I love you, I forgive you. But it isn't until the very end where Joseph weeps. And whether he's weeping from joy, from relief of being able to express the forgiveness that he has given to his brothers. I mean, there's a whole emotional uplifting in that process. Now, that doesn't mean that Joseph has forgotten what his brothers did. I mean, those scars, I have to believe, have always been with him for the rest of his life. He had to carry those scars around within him. But just acknowledging the fact that I can release you from that which you've done to me, then releases me from the burden of guilt and anger and resentment that I carry. And so Joseph went through this transition as well. So the forgiveness that he offered to his brothers released him and them, not from the actions, but from the guilt and the burden and the scars, the pain, all of that were presented. So as we look to how Ephrata, how we are a balm in Ephrata of healing. We have, at the conclusion of this moment, where we can come forward and extend our commitments to the church with the sharing of our gifts and talents, but ultimately it is a sharing of our commitments to God. To God. So that God can use us in however God takes shape and form of us to mold us and to meld us into that good, that balm in Ephrata. So let us, with joy, return to the balm in Gilead, but it's going to be the balm in Ephrata. And as Darlene plays, and if we want to sing along, while those that come forward with their commitments do so, please do so.